A quiet room can reveal more about a person than a crowded world ever could, and that truth makes many people uncomfortable. One person loses confidence after being alone for too long, becomes anxious, restless, desperate for noise, desperate for attention, while another walks through silence and somehow becomes calmer, stronger, harder to shake, harder to control. That difference raises a disturbing question. Why do some people fall apart when they are alone, while others slowly become powerful? Why does silence feel peaceful to some people and terrifying to others? Most people spend their lives believing being alone means rejection, failure, sadness, or loss. From childhood, people are taught to stay surrounded, stay connected, stay noticed, because being wanted feels safe. But hidden deep inside psychology is a truth few people stop to think about. Time alone can change the way the mind works. It can expose emotional weakness, remove distractions, and force a person to meet parts of themselves they spend years trying to avoid. The uncomfortable truth is this: silence often exposes what noise hides. Constant attention can distract people from insecurity. Endless conversations can cover fear. Busy lives can hide emotional dependence. Then one quiet moment arrives, and suddenly there is nowhere left to run from your own thoughts. Many people mistake this discomfort for weakness. They believe being alone is damaging them, when in reality it may be revealing them. Psychology shows an important difference between loneliness and chosen solitude. Yet most people treat them as the same thing. One drains energy, the other can quietly build it. One creates emotional dependence, the other can create emotional control. And the people who understand this often begin changing in ways others cannot explain. They stop reacting so quickly. They stop chasing approval. They stop needing constant reassurance. Their confidence starts feeling quieter, calmer, more stable. Strangely, the less they beg for attention, the more presence they seem to carry. But there is another side to this story that almost nobody talks about, because being alone can also become dangerous when misunderstood. Too much isolation can slowly damage a person. Silence can either become training or destruction depending on how someone learns to face it. That is exactly why this video matters. By the end, you will understand the hidden psychology of being alone, why silence feels painful at first, how solitude can quietly build emotional strength, why powerful people stop depending on attention, the dangerous mistake most people make with isolation, and how being alone can slowly reshape confidence, clarity, and self-control in ways most never notice until it changes everything. Some of what you hear may feel uncomfortable. Some ideas may completely change the way you look at loneliness, confidence, and personal power. Stay with this video until the end because the final lesson may completely change the way you think about silence and the role it plays in your life. Welcome to the channel, where psychology, human behavior, and hidden truths are explored in simple ways that actually make sense. If this kind of content speaks to you, subscribe and join us for more videos like this. A quiet belief starts growing inside people long before they are old enough to question it. Stay connected, stay around people, stay accepted, stay involved, be social, be friendly, be liked, fit in, speak more, smile more, reply faster. Never sit alone too long, never disappear too much. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, many people slowly begin learning an invisible lesson without realizing it. Being surrounded means safety, being wanted means value, being alone means danger. Nobody says it directly, yet the message quietly repeats itself through schools, families, friendships, movies, trends, and everyday life. The loudest person gets attention. The popular person gets praise. The person surrounded by people looks successful. Slowly, silence begins to feel suspicious. Solitude begins to feel uncomfortable, and loneliness becomes confused with being alone, even though the two are completely different things. This confusion quietly changes the way people experience life. Someone can sit at a crowded dinner table and still feel emotionally invisible. Someone can scroll through hundreds of messages and still feel empty. Someone can laugh with friends all day and still feel disconnected inside. At the same time, another person can sit alone in a quiet room, reading, thinking, breathing, reflecting, and feel calm, clear, even peaceful. That difference matters more than most people realize because loneliness is not about empty rooms. Loneliness is emotional disconnection. Solitude is chosen space. One feels forced, the other feels intentional. One drains energy, the other can restore it. Yet many people panic the moment silence arrives because they were taught that silence means rejection. The moment plans get canceled, messages slow down, attention disappears, anxiety starts speaking, questions begin showing up. Why is nobody texting me? Why am I alone? Did people forget me? Do I matter less when nobody notices me? A strange fear quietly rises, not because the room is empty, but because the mind starts connecting solitude with worthlessness. That fear becomes stronger in a world addicted to noise. Phones buzz, notifications arrive, screens glow. Conversations never stop, music plays, videos autoplay, opinions flood every quiet second. Most people do not even notice how uncomfortable they feel when nothing is happening until they are suddenly forced into silence. A weekend alone feels unbearable. 5 minutes without checking a phone feels restless. A quiet room feels heavy, not because silence is dangerous, but because silence removes distractions. And the moment distractions disappear, something else finally enters the room. Your thoughts. At first, this feels uncomfortable in ways people struggle to explain. The mind suddenly becomes louder. Thoughts that were hidden behind noise begin surfacing. Old insecurities start whispering. Regrets return. Fear returns. Questions rise that nobody wants to answer. Am I happy? Why do I care so much about what people think? Why do I need validation all the time? Why am I scared to be by myself? Why does silence feel heavy? This is the part where many people run, not physically, emotionally. They return to noise. They reach for messages, endless scrolling, constant entertainment, endless conversations, temporary distractions, social media, background sounds, anything loud enough to interrupt inner discomfort. Most people believe they are escaping boredom when they are really escaping themselves, because silence has a way of exposing what noise hides. Silence reveals insecurity. Silence reveals emotional dependence. Silence reveals fear. Silence reveals loneliness that already existed under constant activity. Silence reveals confusion about identity. And that truth feels uncomfortable because many people secretly do not know who they are without distractions, relationships, approval, routines, or attention. This is why being alone feels painful at first. Not because solitude is harmful, but because most people were never taught how to sit with themselves. Nobody teaches emotional stillness. Nobody teaches self-reflection. Nobody teaches how to face uncomfortable thoughts without panic. People are taught achievement, productivity, performance, social behavior, success. Yet almost nobody teaches what happens when life becomes quiet. So when silence finally appears, the experience feels overwhelming. A person sits alone for 10 minutes and instantly reaches for stimulation because stillness feels unfamiliar. But unfamiliar does not mean dangerous. Discomfort does not mean weakness. Sometimes discomfort means truth is finally entering the room. There is a sentence that quietly explains this entire process. Silence does not create weakness. It reveals what was already there. That sentence matters because many people misunderstand what solitude exposes. A person may think, being alone made me anxious, but often the anxiety was already there. Noise simply covered it. Someone may think, silence ruined my confidence, yet confidence may have already depended on attention. Someone may think, being alone made me insecure, when insecurity had simply been hidden behind social comfort. Solitude removes masks. That is why it feels uncomfortable before it feels peaceful. Many people never notice how emotionally dependent they are until attention disappears. One delayed text suddenly ruins their mood. One ignored message creates panic. One moment of distance feels personal. Why? because emotional stability quietly became connected to external validation. Feeling okay depended on responses, approval, presence, attention, reassurance, compliments, company. This creates emotional fragility because anything controlled by other people can disappear. The problem with dependence is not needing people. Humans naturally need connection. The problem begins when identity becomes dependent on constant emotional confirmation. When worth feels borrowed from others, silence becomes terrifying. Every quiet moment feels like proof of rejection. But this is where solitude begins teaching a difficult lesson. Your emotions cannot always belong to other people. A strange shift slowly starts happening when someone stays with silence long enough. At first, the room feels loud with overthinking. Fear feels heavy. Emotions rise and fall quickly. Thoughts race. The urge to escape becomes strong. Yet if someone stays long enough, something begins changing. The noise inside slowly settles. Thoughts become clearer. Reactions slow down. Emotional storms calm down. Small things stop feeling catastrophic. Silence stops feeling empty and starts feeling spacious. This process rarely happens overnight. It feels messy. Some days feel peaceful. Some days feel restless. But slowly, emotional dependence starts loosening its grip. A person realizes they no longer panic over delayed responses. They stop obsessing over attention. They stop over-explaining themselves. They stop needing approval to feel okay. Without realizing it, emotional control begins growing. This is one of the hidden powers of solitude that people rarely talk about. Emotional control does not grow in chaos. It grows in awareness, and awareness often grows in silence. When someone constantly reacts to every emotion, every opinion, every message, every moment of rejection, life feels exhausting. One compliment creates confidence. One criticism destroys it. One good day creates happiness. One ignored text ruins everything. Emotional stability becomes external. But solitude quietly changes this relationship. A person starts observing emotions instead of obeying them. Instead of instantly reacting, they pause. Instead of panic, reflection appears. Instead of chasing attention, calm enters. Slowly, emotional maturity begins developing in silence, where nobody is clapping, nobody is watching, nobody is rewarding progress. And that is what makes it powerful. Power begins when your emotions stop being controlled by other people. This does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean pretending not to care. It means your inner state stops depending completely on external behavior. Rejection hurts less. Criticism loses power. Delays stop creating panic. Loneliness becomes easier to understand instead of fear. Someone else's mood no longer controls your entire day. You stop needing emotional rescue every moment life feels uncomfortable. And strangely, this emotional independence changes how people experience you. Calmness becomes visible, presence changes, desperation fades, neediness becomes quieter. People begin feeling stability around you without understanding why. There is another hidden effect of solitude that changes people in ways they rarely expect. Clarity. Noise hides truth. Constant activity hides truth. Endless social interaction hides truth. A busy life can distract someone from asking painful questions. Am I actually happy here? Are these relationships healthy? Am I chasing goals I care about or goals that impress people? Do I even like the version of myself I become around certain people? Most people never stop long enough to ask these questions because constant noise makes reflection unnecessary. But solitude forces reflection. Suddenly patterns become visible. Fake friendships become obvious. One-sided relationships become obvious. Emotional habits become obvious. Distractions become obvious. Bad routines become obvious. Solitude acts like a mirror many people spend years avoiding. Sometimes the hardest truth arrives quietly. You realize some people were never adding peace, only distraction. Some goals were never meaningful, only impressive. Some habits were not helping, only numbing discomfort. Solitude creates distance, And distance often creates perspective. Things that once felt urgent begin looking small. Drama feels exhausting. Approval feels temporary. Competition feels meaningless. And a deeper question slowly begins forming inside the mind. What do I actually want? Not what looks impressive, not what gains approval, not what keeps others comfortable. What do I want when nobody is watching? That question changes people because identity begins forming differently in silence. Most people borrow identity without noticing. They become what others expect. They wear personalities that fit environments. Different around family, different around friends, different online. Different around strangers, different in relationships. Approval slowly shapes behavior until identity feels borrowed rather than chosen. Solitude interrupts this process. A person sits alone long enough and starts asking uncomfortable questions. Who am I without applause, without compliments, without attention, without constant reassurance, without trying to impress anyone? Those questions sound simple, but they quietly reshape lives because many people realize they barely know themselves outside social performance. And this connects to something deeper about attention itself. Most people chase attention without realizing why. Attention feels good because it feels like proof. Proof of worth, proof of attractiveness, proof of importance, proof of identity. Someone notices you and suddenly confidence rises. Someone ignores you and confidence falls. The emotional system becomes unstable because validation is external. When approval becomes emotional oxygen, silence feels suffocating. But powerful people eventually learn something different. Peace cannot survive if it constantly depends on attention. Real confidence becomes quieter, less dramatic, less performative, less desperate. It stops screaming for reassurance. It becomes internal. There is an uncomfortable truth many people notice too late. The harder someone chases attention, the weaker they often feel emotionally. Desperation grows, overthinking grows, fear of rejection grows, self-doubt grows. Because constant chasing quietly says something painful to the mind. I am not enough unless others confirm it. Solitude interrupts this pattern. It teaches someone how to exist without constant applause, how to feel okay without immediate replies, how to enjoy moments without performing them, how to sit quietly without panic. That process feels uncomfortable before it feels freeing, but it changes everything. The moment someone stops needing everyone to notice them, people often notice them more. Not because of tricks, not manipulation, not mind games. Presence changes, calmness changes, confidence changes. Someone emotionally stable moves differently through life. They stop forcing conversations, stop chasing approval, stop begging for attention, stop over-explaining themselves. Their energy becomes quieter, their confidence feels less fragile. People feel emotional steadiness around them even when they cannot explain it. Calm feels powerful because calm often signals security. And insecurity usually sounds loud, over-explaining sounds loud, constant validation seeking sounds loud, desperation sounds loud, quiet confidence rarely begs to be seen. Still, solitude can become dangerous when misunderstood. Learning to enjoy being alone does not mean rejecting connection. It does not mean disappearing forever. It does not mean distrusting relationships. Humans still need people. Connection matters. Love matters. Friendship matters. Support matters. The lesson is not isolation. The lesson is freedom. Learn to be okay alone so relationships stop feeling like survival. Learn to enjoy your own company so attention stops feeling like oxygen. Learn emotional steadiness so connection becomes healthy instead of desperate. Because dependence often turns relationships heavy, fearful, exhausting. A person terrified of being alone may accept disrespect simply to avoid silence, stay in bad situations simply to avoid emptiness, ignore red flags simply to avoid starting over. Solitude changes this because emotional stability creates standards. The strongest people do not avoid connection, they stop depending on it. That difference changes everything. Relationships become choice instead of survival. Attention becomes enjoyable instead of necessary. Time alone becomes peaceful instead of terrifying. Silence stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling useful. Slowly, emotional panic fades. Someone stops begging for replies, stops chasing unavailable people, stops overthinking every silence, stops fearing moments alone. They become calmer, more selective, more thoughtful, more emotionally steady. Their confidence feels quieter, stronger, less dependent on moods, trends, or approval. And without realizing it, people begin feeling different around them. Presence becomes heavier in the best way. Words matter more because fewer words are needed. Calm replaces performance. Security replaces chasing. Real power sounds quiet. And maybe this changes everything you thought you knew about being alone. Because being alone was never the real fear. The real fear was sitting in silence long enough to hear yourself clearly, long enough to notice the thoughts you avoided, the insecurities you buried, the questions you kept pushing away. That is why silence feels heavy to so many people. Not because silence is empty, but because silence is honest. It removes distractions, it removes performance, it removes noise, and for the first time you meet yourself without interruption. But hidden inside that uncomfortable silence is something most people spend their entire lives searching for in other people. Clarity, the kind that helps you see what truly matters. Peace that does not disappear when attention disappears. Strength that does not collapse when life becomes difficult. Self-respect that grows quietly when you stop abandoning yourself just to feel accepted. Slowly, the fear changes shape. You stop asking, "Who will stay?" and begin asking a deeper question, "Who am I becoming?" Because at some point, growth stops looking loud. It stops looking dramatic. Sometimes growth looks like sitting alone without panic, saying less but meaning more, needing less approval, feeling calmer in uncertainty, walking away from what drains you, trusting yourself more than noise. And maybe the people who seemed the strongest were never fearless. Maybe they simply stopped running from themselves. Maybe they learned that solitude is not punishment, it is preparation. A quiet space where confidence becomes real, emotions become steady, and identity becomes stronger. The world teaches people to fear being alone. But real power often begins the moment you stop fighting silence and start listening to what it is trying to teach you. So if this video made you think differently, if even one part of this connected with something inside you, take a second and let me know in the comments, what is one thing solitude has taught you about yourself? And if you want more videos about psychology, human behavior, confidence, self-growth, and the hidden patterns that shape our lives, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Like this video if you enjoyed it, and share it with someone who may need to hear this message today. Because sometimes one quiet realization can change the way a person sees their whole life. And remember this, the moment being alone stops feeling like emptiness, it starts becoming power.